Hi friends, it's Monica. So today I wanted to do something a little different. I said at the beginning of the year that we would start testing out some of our oxides with different color combinations and see if we can put together some sort of recipe or menu for some of the items that we want to create. Now when I say items, I mean specific backgrounds, like if we wanted to have a rust background or if we wanted to have more of a patina background, a night background, a day background. That's kind of what I'm talking about because I know that there are a lot of videos out there with color combinations with your oxides and your distress inks, but I really want to focus on a specific type of background. So that's what I thought I would do today. And this Biggs die is one that when I first saw it, I just thought it was fantastic. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with it, but I just liked the uniqueness of it, and I like the fact that some of the projects I saw out there just really had some rust. So typically whenever I get a new die, I just kind of test it out, and this isn't anything special. I was just kind of testing out the die to see how it went together. As you can see, I used some black distress paper, and then I have a little heart here, and then I have some letters from Tim Holtz, and then I have a stamp here that is just one of my vintage stamps that I was testing out. So I just kind of wanted to test out the die and see what I was working with. So once I decided that I wanted to definitely do a more detailed project, and this is what I came up with, and this is what we're going to do today. We're going to create some backgrounds where you can get a rust look, and I'm going to show you a little trick as far as this inside, because I know that there is a stamp out there. I think it's the Professor stamp that is perfect for the inside, but I didn't have it. And I know that there's a new one coming out with a larger Professor, so I wasn't really sure if I wanted to invest in both, because I know Tim has a lot of new products coming out. In fact, Creativation is going on right now. So I wanted to kind of be selective as far as what I was going to buy, but I wanted to just give you some ideas for this rust. Now this background has some texture, and typically when you're going to get some want to add some texture, you're going to want to use some distress paste that has the medium. It's not the medium, it's the, I can't think of the word. It's just basically, it's the grit paste is what I'm trying to think of here. But I didn't have any of that, and I know he's coming out with a new grit paste, so I didn't want to buy the old one. So I ended up just kind of playing with some regular old collage medium, and I actually used sugar. I don't know if I would recommend sugar, but sugar had the right kind of texture to be able to give you those rust spots. But again, sugar, you're gonna, you might end up with some ants in your workspace. But I just used so little. I used very little, and I mixed it up with my collage medium just because I wanted to get the texture. But I'm going to show you how we can try to create some texture just using the collage medium if you don't have the grit paste. And so let's go ahead and kind of jump right in, and then we'll get into some of the demos. So when you're working with rust, basically there's three colors you want to work with. You're going to want to work with your browns. And I just pulled out all of my browns. I pulled out my walnut stain, I pulled out my brush corduroy, and I pulled out vintage photo. So that's what we're going to use for our browns. And then you're going to also want some red tones in your rust. So I just pulled out some of my reds. I pulled out Fired Brick, Barn Door, Candied Apple, and I have the both in oxides and inks. And I'm going to show you why I pulled them both out, because they do react a little differently when you're actually putting them on your background. And then finally, the last color when you're trying to create some rusts are your orange tones. And I pulled out Rusty Hinge, I pulled out Wild Honey, Spice Marmalade, and then Ripe Persimmon. So we're going to try some different combinations. Now, of course, you can throw in a cracked pistachio, because this will give you a little bit of the patina look. So we'll do that on one of them as well, but I wanted to show you some options with the cracked pistachio. And then, as you can see here, some of the outline is more of a darker black, and that's where I actually used the black soot, and then the pumice stone is what I used for this piece right here. But we're going to really focus on the background, and then in part, I think I'll do a part two. Part two will actually put the card together. So let's go ahead and just work with some backgrounds here. So I'm working with heavy watercolor cardstock, and I just kind of cut it down into swatches, because really the piece that I need to cut out isn't very big, but I wanted to have a bigger surface to be able to try some of these combinations. And then what we're going to do is on the back, we'll write down some of the combinations, and then maybe I'll put together some sort of a recipe sheet that you guys can download, so that way you can keep track of your recipes for your different type of rust combinations. All right, so let's get started. Now, when you are working with rust to make rust combinations, you're going to want to have some sort of a water sprayer. So I have my distress sprayer here. Something where you can get in a little deeper, and I have these daubers, and then you may want another type of a dauber. I don't actually think I used a dauber. Mine was mostly just dipping, but if you do need a dauber, let me grab mine real quick. Let's see. All right, just any sort of a dauber, so that way you can add some of your ink. So we'll just put that here just in case we need it. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do just a background, and we're going to start with our browns. So I'm going to start with just one of the basic ones, Walnut Stain and Vintage Photo. And I found that the Distress Oxides work the best when you're trying to create rust, but for your top layer, when we actually finish it off, that's where we use more of a Distress ink. And you're going to see when we actually put the ink on our surface that between the Distress inks and your Distress Oxides, they really are different. So I'm just sliding it onto my surface here, and then I'm just going to go ahead and just kind of dab this in, because we're just going to create a basic background that we can start layering on top of. And remember, we're going to be cutting this down into a circle, so don't worry too much about where it is. You just want to get full coverage so we can create some rust. Now the other thing that I should have told you you're going to need is you're going to need some sort of a cloth to be able to clean off your surface, and then you're going to want some sort of a heating tool. So let's go ahead and just dry this off so we can start layering. Okay, so now that we have our first layer, it's not really looking like rust yet, but again, we're just going for our first layer. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to add in a little darker brown. And this is where I'm going to actually just bring in my Walnut Stain ink. Now this isn't the Distress ink, and as you can see, even when you add it onto your surface, it looks different than your oxide. And this is going to be a little darker color. So I'm going to just go ahead and just spray it down, and as you can see, it's a lot darker than the oxides. But that's what we want. We want different shades and different combinations. So I'm just going to go ahead and get that on my white cardstock for my next layer. All right. Okay, so the next color we're going to go into is we're going to go into the oranges, and this is where I have these right here. And then I also have some Distress Stain that I'm working on, and I have that in the darker color, Brush Corduroy, I have Wild Honey, and then I have the Ground Espresso. But we're going to use that towards the end. But I did want to show you how the stains are really good for this type of a background as well. But we're going to get to those in just a minute. Okay, so let's go ahead and work with just a couple colors. Let's go ahead and work with the Rusty Hinge, and we'll work with the Wild Honey. So there's there's Rusty Hinge, and there's some Wild Honey. And then I'm going to take my sprayer once again And you see I really saturated because I want it to be able to really be moist when I add it to my paper, and that's why it's a good idea to probably use cardstock that is watercolor cardstock. All right, so now we want to be a little bit more distinctive as far as where we're adding it. I don't necessarily want to put it all over. I just want to add it in some places. And then, you know, if you need to have your rag to kind of dab it down, that's fine too. All right. So now it's starting to kind of come to life. Okay, so now we have our orange tones or more of a yellow tone, and then we're going to now add our red tone. Now this is more of a yellow. On our next example, we'll go ahead and we'll try using some spice marmalade, which is actually a little bit more orange than yellow. And then the rusty hinge, I really think we need a little bit more of that. So I'm just going to go ahead and add that down. And I'm just going to get bigger colors of that. Let's see. See, when I smear it, it kind of, there's no water on it, but it gives me a really nice texture, and that's really what I'm going for here. Just pieces of texture, and that's these pieces right here. So I'm not necessarily using liquid, but I just want some color, and that's where I'm adding this. Okay. And then if you want to finish it off, of course, you can just spritz it a bit, and then maybe just add some water just to add to the background. All right, and as you can see, we are layering in between, and it's starting to come alive. Still not as dark as we want, but we'll get there. All right, now we're going to add our red, and our red is going to be our deepest color. So I'm going to go with some more oxides. We're going to go ahead and use Fired Brick on this one. So let's go ahead and spray it down, and then we'll just add some of our red. All right, so now we have some of our background going on. And remember, even though you have big splotches here, you're going to be cutting it down. So the whole, you know, you're not going to be getting these whole pieces. When you actually go to do your die cut, you're just going to pick the best part that you like. And that's what's nice about having a bigger swatch, is then you can choose, you know, what color you want to work with. All right, now I want to have more distinct colors, so this is where I'm coming in with my ink rather than my oxide. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of add that color to this. So I'm just kind of smearing to get that color on there. And that way it won't be more of a watercolor, it'll be more of an ink color. So I'm just kind of grabbing some of that ink on the bottom. All right. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and come in with our brush corduroy. And this is where we're going to actually use our ink. So let me just go ahead and rub this on, and then let's just going to add some color just to cover up some of that white. Okay. So as you can see, it's starting to come together, but we still need to have it a little bit darker. So this is where I'm going to actually add some of the stain, and I'm going to use the ground espresso. So I'm just going to kind of dab this down, and then you can see you can just kind of add it. So there's not a lot of skill involved with this. It's just more of trying to find the best color combinations. Looks good. And I'm just kind of dabbing at different places, trying to get different sorts of patterns to make it work. And you could even come in with distressed paint if you wanted to. I'm not going to be I'm just going to kind of go all over the place here. But I only want little pieces of this red. So if you have paint, so, you know, if you don't have all the colors of one, you can mix your mediums. So don't think that you have to use all of your oxides, all of your stains, all of your inks. You can mix and match your mediums, so that way you can get different color combinations. And, you know, of course, distress reacts to water. All right. So that's pretty grungy. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more of a rust tone. And this is where I'm going to use my Rusty Hinge. As you can see, I'm just kind of adding some color to the background. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go to my die cut machine, and I'm going to cut this out, and then I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So I went ahead and I cut out my meter, and this is the part that's going to go here. And then this also cuts out, but we're not going to actually do this because, like I said, I don't have the stamp. So I went ahead and I created my own meter that I can stick in there. So I use this as a background. I ended up cutting this piece from here, so I have a hole, and then I just put the paper underneath. So I'll show you how to do that when we actually put the card together. So we're going to focus on this piece right now and the screws. So we want it to be a little bit darker around the edges, and this is where some of the stain can come in, as well as some of the daubers. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to get some of my stain And I'm just going to add it around my edge. And then I'm going to just take my cloth and just kind of smear it a little bit. And this will take away the white edge. And then I'm going to actually start using my daubers for more specific coloring. So the first thing before we actually get to that is I want to show you how, if you don't have the grit paste, how we can create our own texture. So I'm just using Distress Collage Medium, and this isn't the best way. Your best way, of course, is going to be to use the grit paste, but since I don't have it, I'm just going to go ahead and just kind of add my own here, which is a decent substitute, but it's certainly not the best, but it'll work. All right, so now that I have some rust pieces, I'm going to go ahead and just dry it. So now I have a little bit of texture, as you can see, and it's hard. So I'm going to go ahead and just add some coloring over that. And I'm going to use some of my Distress stain here. And then another thing that I used before, because I want it to be a little bit thicker, is I used Distress crayons. So like I said, the main thing I'm trying to emphasize here is use what you have. You don't have to go out and, you know, buy every single medium out there. You know, if you have different colors and different mediums, then use what you have. You know, I didn't have the grit paste, so I just substituted using what I had. And then I want to have a little bit more red. Let's see, maybe we'll do some orange. Okay, so that's the spiced marmalade, adding a little bit orange, but I really want to have a little bit more red to it. And let's see what I have here. I have Candied Apple. I don't have all the crayons either, so let's, I think Aged Mahogany might be a little too dark, so let's try Candied Apple. And just keep playing with it till you get the result that you want. All right. Okay, so now I have some texture to my rust. And now I'm going to go ahead and edge the outsides. And I'm using these daubers, and I'll be using black soot. So let's get that. And I'm going to be coming inside here. And these are just some of the finishing touches. So I'm just taking my dauber and adding black soot to the inside. All right. And as you can see, it kind of finishes that off. And then I'll do the same to the outside. Now, even though we actually used the stain, I want some of that shadow to come up on my meter. So it's starting to come together. And then, you know, if you feel like you need to do a once over just to kind of seal it, it's not, I mean, in my opinion, it's not necessary, but you know, I'm not a very precise crafter. I just kind of play, I do what I, you know, I just kind of work with what I think is going to look good, and I just keep kind of working it until I'm happy with the outcome. I mean, honestly, I think this looks great, but let's just add a little bit more brown to it maybe. I mean, I think it looks pretty good. What do you guys think? So here's the end result, and this is kind of what we were going for, and it's pretty close. I mean, you've got your texture, you've got your framing, which I think is important, and I think it looks pretty realistic. And then, you know, of course, what you're going to want to do is do the same thing to these little screws here that we have. So let me just do that real quick before we move on to the next part. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead, and this is again just really easy to just get your walnut stain, or excuse me, your, what is this? This is, yeah, this is walnut stain. Okay, so I'm using distressed ink rather than oxide, and I'm just going to edge the outside, and it just gives it a more finished look. And I'm going to do that with the round circle as well as these little octagons, which are supposed to be screws. All right, so there's one, and we need 4 of these. Little octagons. They're small, guys, so don't lose track of them on your workspace. All right. Okay, so there's 2. And it's okay if they don't look exactly the same. I mean, these are supposed to be aged items, so not, you know, every piece of metal is going to age exactly the same way. So you want your little screws and your background to be a little different, you know. And I can tell you, you know, if you make several of these, they're not going to look the same every single time, because it, you know, your combination or the way that you dab your paper, it's not going to always be the same. And that's okay. It doesn't have to always be the same. You're just looking for a specific look. Now I am missing one of my screws here, but you guys got the idea. So once you get all your ink, then you're just going to go ahead and attach the octagon part of the screw to the circle. And you just need a little bit. You don't need much at all. And then you want to have some sort of a poker to be able to just kind of center it. And you've got a little bit of time with your liquid glue. Oops, it's not. Add a little bit more. All right, so there's one. got loose glue. Look at how I have that floating. That's crazy. I have a piece of glue stuck to me. So I wonder if that's how magicians do it. Alright, so let me find that glue string. Look at that. Ooh, magic. That's funny. Alright, so let me get that piece of glue off. Okay, there we go. And then let's put this here. It's your second screw. And then I've lost them, but you get the idea, right? Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to fix this plate here. And like I said, I created these that fit perfectly underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out, and I'll be right back. Okay, so as you can see, I took that one piece and I just cut out the center because I'm going to show you how I did the gauge here. Now, your fingers are going to be dirty, so if you are going to be working with cardstock that you don't want to get dirty, you may want to wash up as you go along, but again, I don't mind grunge, so I'm going to just go with it. Alright, so I've got my little screws drying here. And then this is the gauge, and like I said, I didn't have the stamp, so I went ahead and created my own little gauge to be able to insert it. And then I'm just going to go ahead and add it here, but before I do that, I want to, you know, age it up a little bit. So I'm going to be using some antique linen, and I don't want it to be real dark, so I'm just working off of the color that's already on my dauber, just to give it a little bit of age. And then I'm going to glue this down, and then I'll trim around it. But before I do that, I want to actually add the black inside like we did with the circle. So let's do that first. Alright. Now if you have big hands, you might have some trouble doing this, but again, you know, when you're creating rust, it doesn't have to be perfect. I think it's so funny that people stress about perfection, and when you're a vintage inspired crafter, you don't want it to look perfect. You want it to look old and grungy. So, you know, don't sweat it. As Tim would say, get over yourself. He likes to say that. Alright, so I'm going to just go ahead and add a little bit of glue here. Alright. And then I'm going to center this best I can. Alright. And I want my 5 to be in the middle, so just kind of position it so that way, you know, it's centered. And then you're going to want to give it a minute to dry before you actually cut it. And I probably could have aged this up a little bit more. Let me just daub some color in here. I don't want it to be real dark. I'm just taking some lighter colors. I used walnut stain, antique linen. This is what is this? Brush corduroy, just to kind of grunge it up a little bit. All right. And then once you have it dried, then you're just going to kind of trim it. If you hear that noise in the background, that's my washing machine going. Sunday afternoon, so my husband is watching the football game. I'm in here crafting. It's a good day. Alright, so just trying to get some of the white off, and you know, we can add some more black soot to that white, so again, don't sweat it. All right. So that's pretty good. All right, so let's go ahead and there it is. I mean, that's pretty much it. You're going to want to add your piece here, a little heart, but that pretty much is your gauge. So we're going to go ahead and put this video into 2 parts because I know this is really long, but I wanted to basically show you how to create rust on your meter, and then we'll come back tomorrow and we'll put the card together. All right, thanks everybody.